It's that we're all stewards of a seat for now. You have to leave it better than you found it. So we have family governance and like business governance. We have 2 meetings a year. One is a unit holder meeting for the ownership, do all the fiduciary work. The family meeting is purposely set aside specifically for the family, much more about how the family wants to operate together as a family that owns a business. We always joke happiness is dictated by expectation. Almost every time in our experience and in those I talk to, our expectations are somewhat unrealistic because we are passionate and want to make sure that we have clarity and certainty.
Hey there, and welcome to Your Next Gen Friend, a successor's guide to business transition, a podcast for figuring out what's next in or beyond your family business. I'm Andrea Carpenter, transition strategist and second gen. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, family dynamics, identity, leadership, wealth, and how to define success on your own terms. Here's to finding your own way forward. I'm so glad you're here. All right, everyone. When I put out that I was starting this podcast, AJ was one of the first people who was like, yes, count me in. I love talking about this stuff. So I'm super excited for our conversation today. A little bit about our guest, AJ. So he grew up in his family business, Sprague Pest Solutions, and today he serves as the executive vice president after more than a decade of hands-on leadership across operations, sales, and regional management. So recognized nationally as an emerging leader in his industry, AJ's passionate about how the next generation, that's us, can step into family business roles with confidence, bringing both respect for tradition and a clear vision for change. So he and his family are committed to building not just a strong company, but a lasting legacy. And I think that is awesome. And I'm excited for our conversation today. So AJ, welcome. Anything high level you want to share about yourself and your journey in the context of family business?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Again, I think I really believe that family business is really kind of the cornerstone of the overall economy and where great business happens. And so anything to pay it forward from all the things that we've learned over the years from other family businesses is just, it's an honor and it's really exciting. So thank you for having me. And yeah, kind of just a little bit about my journey. I think as many of us that grew up in family businesses, our whole childhood was a mix of odd jobs. And for me, that meant cleaning warehouses and stickering traps and cleaning trucks and, all of that. But really in the pest control industry, at least here in Washington, you have to be 18 to get a license. And so I do remember that there was kind of this coming of age moment for each of us cousins as we turned 18 and went off and got our pesticide applicators licenses and spent a number of summers running route as a technician in college, kind of post high school into college. But one of the things that I think is really powerful and a requirement within our family governance is even if you want to join the family business, which I, as I think many others, never did and thought, God, once I'm out of here, I am never coming back. Is you do have to work somewhere else for at least 2 years before you're even eligible to apply and come back into the organization. So I left, went into a professional sales role, spent multiple years outside of the industry, outside of the company, and learned so much, not only about just being a salesperson and being a professional in not my family's organization, but realizing that oh my God, all I've ever known was Sprague. And I thought the culture everywhere, I just thought that's how businesses worked, and go to a major, national corporation and find out the culture's not the same everywhere. And I didn't know how special it was. And I kind of always took it for granted. So going out into the world and working outside of it and realizing, oh my God, if I'm going to work this hard, I want to work for myself. And my family, because here I'm a number and no one knows who I am. And it's just did you hit your sales numbers? Okay, we'll talk to you in a month. And so, I think if nothing else, those years brought so much appreciation and gratitude and this kind of impetus of stewardship. We need to keep this thing going because it is different and rare and it's special. And I didn't know that before. And so I didn't really know that it needed so much focus and perpetuation. And so, came back into and kind of one of our rules, or not kind of, one of our rules is if you want to come back to the organization, you can apply to something you're qualified at, but you are not given a job. You interview like everyone else in the candidate pool. And if you're not qualified, you're not getting hired. And so having been in outside sales for a couple of years, the only thing I was qualified for was a standard sales role in our Seattle office, and came into the organization with everyone else, went through all the regular trainings like everyone else, like a new hire. And from there worked my way into a branch manager role, moving to Utah for 3 years, then came back to Seattle, ran the Puget Sound, ran a larger region, then became director of operations, and then just recently stepped in the executive vice president role. So, as most of my cousins in our generation and everyone, we've all been technicians and kind of done every part of the organization, and know how all those jobs work, which I think, lends a lot of credibility and just understanding and care for the overall organization when you know the work that's being done, like the hands-on in the field work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you think those early experiences going out of the business, I think you talked a little bit about, okay, yeah, the culture is definitely different. I kind of want to contribute there. So then you came in and you start working your way up inside Sprague. Like, how did that shape the way that you see your family business today, and maybe even your vision for what the future of your business could look like?
So it's a great question. And when I think about those early days, especially kind of my early days in management. So coming in as a salesperson, individual contributor, I was part of the team. Everyone knew I was part of the family, but also I had to hit numbers. And so really once I became a manager and running my first office, which was in Salt Lake City, it was this idea, and this is something that we've been taught by our parents from the previous generation that we call G3 for Generation 3. And it's that we're all stewards of a seat for now. Like, you might be the manager or the CEO or the president, but you are not the president. You are the person stewarding the seat for the next person. And so it's this idea of like, you have to leave it better than you found it, but it's also not yours to sit in forever. And so the day you get into it, you have to be thinking about who's going to sit in it next, and how are you going to set it up for that person, and how are you going to create opportunities. And they might be family, they might be non-family, but really we measure people at Sprague based on how many people get promoted that you developed. And so it's always this idea of like, how do I get out of the way for the next person that's ready to step up? Because if we always have people ready to step up and backfill and take that and then steward it for the next section or the next time period, we will never stop growing. Like, there will be an endless amount of opportunity if everyone is focused on how do I develop my replacement, because I can't do more until they can do more.
Mm-hmm. And I think as you think about leadership, like how much of the leadership of the company is family versus non-family, and yeah, what is the situation there right now?
Yeah, well, and that's really interesting because for most of my career, it has been myself and one other cousin. And 2020, it was right a month before COVID hit. Another cousin joined later in career, had been in enterprise sales and large corporations. And then about 9 months ago, my other cousin joined as our CFO. And what's been a really fun and interesting journey along that is that some people, left for their minimum 2 years. And again, none of us really thought we'd be back in the business. We, from a young age, were trained and never pressured to join. We were taught to be good owners, good stewards. Doesn't mean we have to be in the business. It's only if we choose it and want to be there. And, Sprague has grown significantly over the last 15 years. And a number of my cousins, their careers took off at a trajectory that Sprague wasn't really the right fit for them. It wasn't big enough. The challenges weren't what they were looking for. But as we've been able to scale the organization, there have been these new entry points where, family members that are in their 40s are, joining now at that point of their career, because kind of that intersection has happened of their skill set and what they know how to do and their leadership and development and the growth of the organization are now meeting them where they are. And so a lot of times I hear people be like, well, the kids all graduated college. It's been a couple of years and no one's interested. So I guess that's it. Like, they're not coming. And it's been really fascinating to me to see over the last 5 years, having two of my cousins, both older than me, are rejoining and kind of entering at a different career point. And really that realizing that door is never shut. It's more of making sure that the business and the person's skill sets are intersecting at the right time, and they've had the right exposure to the business throughout as an owner, so that they know when, okay, this is where I can step in and actually elevate and accelerate the growth and the leadership and the stewardship going forward. And I think that's been one of the more impactful and interesting aspects to our growth over the last 5 years that really, I really didn't see that coming. And I am so happy that it's working out that way.
Yeah, that's super cool. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, you might be a little bit of an outlier in the family business space and in terms of the culture it sounds like your family has, the way that you communicate, the way that people get invited in. And if a next gen was listening and they're like, well, that's not my family at all. We don't kind of know. Like, can you explain, because when we were talking before the call, you're talking about some of the governance structures and some of the other things that your family has put in place. It's very intentional in the way that the family has sort of designed the way that you work together. So can you just give us a peek under the hood around family governance and board of directors and some of these other systems that are helping your family really implement a lot of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think I would put that in two kind of buckets. So we have family governance and then what we would consider like business governance. And so from a family governance standpoint, we were very lucky that it just so happened here in the Puget Sound, there happens to be, and in our city and near where we live, happen to be quite a few multi-generation. I mean, we're talking 6, 7, 8 generation businesses that have gone through the kind of this life cycle of we're one thing, now we're diversifying into a few more things. And the phrase that they taught us that we really latched onto was a family-owned business to a family that owns businesses. And this idea of like the engine itself is sacred and needs to be protected. And yet, not everyone's going to work in it. Not everyone's interested in it. So how do we create this kind of more universal thing where it's like, we just want to do business together as a group because we truly enjoy each other and enjoy this idea of like perpetuating forward for more generations. And so that kind of has led itself to, from the time I was, 10, 11 years old, every year, family meetings, they started with ski trips. And I mean, it was just like, put all of our generation in a bunk room and let us like enjoy time together. And then there'd be a meeting and we would get explained what the financials were. And we didn't really understand it, but we had exposure to it. Right. And it was more about talks of like, whether you understand it or not, are an owner and you have to represent us in a certain way and you need to learn to be an owner. And again, no push to be operating, but like one way or another, you have to represent the family and the business in a way that is conducive to our organization. And we're all on stage, whether we're 10 years old or 20 or 30 or 40. And so that matters. And kind of understanding the gravity of that through the repetition year after year, of spending time together, enjoying each other, but also realizing there's something important happening. And I think as you grow up that way, you start to realize like, this is important. And like, whether I'm in it or not, we have to take this seriously. And so I think that exposure, and not only to the business, but to each other, and kind of that constant going to things together and, being shoved into the bunk rooms of a ski house or wherever it may be. And then, for our generation 5, the oldest of which is 11, they've never not had a family meeting, right? They will grow up from birth, being at family meetings. And so we have just stuck with this intentionality that like, we have to meet every year to talk about the things, even the uncomfortable things or the things that are causing friction or tension, because normally where it all falls apart is when families are like, oh, that's the sticky, tough stuff. Let's just avoid that and do the fun stuff or whatever. And then it just slowly drifts apart until that chasm is so big we can't get back over it. And that's been a long journey. I mean, we have had consultants and speakers and all these things to try and help us learn to communicate better as family members. So, I mean, that's a huge bucket of, and I think probably the most important bucket. But I do not want to undersell the other of the actual business governance, which intentionally now we have set in place and have had for 20 or 30 years, outside directors that sit on our board of directors. And so really the family and the ownership elects the board. The board then oversees the business, right? And so it creates kind of this insulation of the operating entity, and it creates advisors both to the business and to the family that have seen, this go this way or go that way, and really help us kind of like sometimes lower the tension or temperature, sometimes push us along to say like, you got to get going, you're missing something. But I think that is like, the family governance and the meeting side is like, that's making sure we all want to do it together. And the board governance and kind of the way we've built that buffer into the organization is really what's let the business grow. And when the family's happy to do business together and the business is growing because we have set these structures in place well, there's really no push to be like, why are we even doing this? Everyone sees it going along the way we thought it would and wanted it to, which makes all of it just massively simpler.
Yeah. You said that the family votes on the board of directors. Is that something that's happening at the family meeting, or is the family meeting more about some of those other family things that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have 2 meetings a year. One is a unit holder meeting for the ownership and do all the fiduciary work. That's where all that happens, as with any corporation with a board of directors. It happens at the shareholder level. Yeah. The family meeting is purposely set aside specifically for the family to work on, like we're doing business updates, and we're doing all of that, but it is much more about how the family wants to operate the business, how the family wants to operate together as a family that owns businesses.
Yep. And the family that owns businesses right now, is it just one? Is it just Sprague is like the business that the family owns, or are there other entities?
So we have other entities. They're all related to Sprague, but it's buildings and properties, many of which we occupy, vehicle leasing back, some of that. But the operating entity is the main engine and the main asset. But we are working on this long-term vision of diversifying that, and also creating opportunities where if someone later down the road wants to start a business of some kind, they could actually come to the family and say, hey, I'm seeking funding to do this startup, to do this thing. And we would have the ability to do that, and create opportunities for the next gen. Maybe pest control isn't their passion, but they're entrepreneurial. And so they want to do this other thing. And maybe we believe that's a good use of our investment. So there's opportunities, really trying to think about it for like generation 5 and 6. And like, how do we set this up for success in the long run where people can pursue their passions and not feel like they have to be outside of the ecosystem to do so?
Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot to unpack inside of there around supporting a family and helping everyone feel like they have their purpose. I think for those that choose to come in the business versus those who are kind of just owners, what could you share about the way that your family thinks about ownership of the business versus operating in the business and people kind of contributing in different capacities? How does that fairness and equality across people who choose to opt in and growing it versus not look like for your family?
Yeah, and I think as you get into these multifamily generations, it ends up being different for everyone. And we've somewhat embraced that difference and said, hey, like you do however you want to do it within the family. That is your prerogative. You are the owner, you choose. Again, using the board, we kind of separate those things out. So your ownership lives up here. Then you have the board of directors. Those of us that are in the business, we have our board of directors has a compensation committee. They set all of our compensation. We are employees, and our compensation and all of that stuff is handled just like any other employee. Ownership is kept separate of those, and specifically using the board as that kind of intermediary to try and prevent or kind of stave off any of those we want to stay grateful and stewards, and we don't want to end up in like the negative entitlement area. And so any way we can try and build that into the system to avoid the opportunity for it. It's impossible to build a perfect system, but we keep trying to think of pitfalls and then manufacture the system in a way that prevents those from coming to pass.
Yeah. And coming into ownership, especially your Gen 5 is 11, like what does that process look like for someone coming in and becoming an owner?
Phew. I think that's where we're starting just now to wrestle with that. That's the oldest, so there's 8 of them from 11 to 2. And that work is just now starting to begin. They're starting to show interest, not in working in the business, but like, what is the business and what do these things mean? And we also have a family foundation, and that's an area for not only those that are not in the business to really engage with the overall ecosystem, but for the next gen to engage in philanthropy and giving and kind of tie them in a place where they can feel good, and the stakes are somewhat lower for them specifically. Yet they need to create a proposal and pitch it to the group and practice speaking and all of these little kind of opportunities to learn and to grow. And so I would say our generation is we have thought through and are pretty specific and structured in what we want to do from a meeting cadence and the family governance and all of that going forward. When it comes to the ownership side of it, I think that's where we have just over the last year, we've started to have some conversations like, oh yeah, we have to we're just, there's a little bit of that like, okay, we just did one. We already have to start on the other. Like you're never done. And I think that's the thing is, it's like a marathon, but it's not even like, it doesn't have a finish line. You're never done. And as soon as one generation kind of makes its way for the next, you're in this space where you're like, okay, we already have to start because you're always too late. Like there's no way to be ahead of it. And yet you're still caring for another generation and their experiences and they're kind of like stepping out and honoring the stewardship. They had to create space for one, but we already have to be thinking how to create space for the next. And then you add in all of these aspects of like, maybe none of them are interested in specifically the operating entity. So on a parallel track, developing high level talent within the organization that may also be those people that run it in the future, because we might not have someone that's interested, and B, they can be as interested as they want. If they're not good enough, they're not getting the seat.
Yeah, I think that's important. And there were 2 things you said in there. One was kind of looking at the people who stewarded what is now becoming a seat that you're sitting in, and then looking at preparing. Let's talk for a minute about kind of those people who you're now stepping into their seats. Like, what was the biggest wisdom that you learned from them?
The joke I always tell, and I talk to a number of other kind of next gen people that are in what I consider like my 5-year ago me. And it's this like, they're not doing anything. They're so slow. What is taking so long? And now I look at it 5 to 7 years later, I'm like, oh man, we got done. Like that went faster than I thought it would. And so there's just this, like, I think, understanding that like if you're having the conversations with the previous generation, kind of the ownership generation, that's the gold. Like they might not have moved anything yet, or like it might not be moving like you want it to, and there will be uncertainty. And that's unfortunately just the game. Like that's what it is. And if I could go back, I wish I would have held more space and grace for them in kind of the loss they were feeling in terms of like, yes, they know logically that they were stewarding a seat that they desperately wanted the next gen to fill in and sit in. And yet they still didn't really want to be done. And finding opportunities to help care for them, even now, when they have stepped out of the operating of the business, and to keep them involved and to keep them kind of, as board members, but we always say like, nose in, fingers out. They just desperately want to know what's going on. And I think we have used this, and I don't remember who gave this analogy to me, but we are thinking of the business in life cycles. And so the business was their baby and it was their whole world. And then it went off to college and had kids, and now they're grandparents. And so they have to move from this space of like, it's my baby to it's my grandchild. And their job is to take it, spoil it, and hand it back. And so where can we create opportunities for them to engage culturally They don't need to know about any of the problems, any of the bad things. They need to smile, give hugs, make people feel great, and then hand it back to us for discipline and all that. Like, but we find in a family business that kind of methodology of thinking it like a family really helps us think like, are you trying to be the parent right now or the grandparent? And as they become grandparents, it's really helpful to be like, look, treat it like a grandchild, like let's operate from that space. And I think that's been really helpful for us thinking through that. And then already thinking about like, oh my God, we're going to have to hand this over too. Like right now it's my baby. And so just thinking from a family life cycle standpoint has helped us quite a bit. I think there's always room for improvement. And honestly, I think this is where most transitions, including ours, kind of find hiccups and fall short, is kind of that post handover phase where it's like, all right, we did it. And we're already looking at generation 5. But like generation 3 is like still here and like, vibrant and wants to do things with their life. And we can't just ignore like, okay, it's done. See ya. You're off to the side. Like, how do you make sure we steward and care for that generation and what they've done for their lifetime as well?
For sure. What you're describing, we call the metamorphosis, because it was a big change that you went through being a successor into becoming more of like a leader or like a key person. But then also for that generation who's transitioning out, their metamorphosis out of that role and what that looks like as they get ready to step into their next adventure. And really everyone has a next adventure, right? For you, the next adventure was, and now I'm in this state where I'm becoming a steward and I'm thinking about growing this and what that looks like. But also those people who stepped out have a next adventure of, I love your analogy of the family and being more like a grandparent. And what does that look like? What impact can they and will they still be able to make on the legacy of the family system and passing down wisdom and being able to enjoy all the fruits of all the things that they grew. So it's really hard. I think you said it, to hold all of those things at one time when you're like a person who is inside of it, like in the day to day, because we get our little blinders on and you're like, oh, I have to do really good at this job. So it sounds like there's a lot of intentionality that your family has around just trying to have discussions on all of these different transformations. So
yeah, it's always trying to and always failing and then learning and getting better, and it's like, I don't know that we'll ever get it right. And that's probably the case for everyone. And that's okay. And like making peace with the fact that we're just going to get it less wrong over and over again. And hopefully learn enough that for the next generation, we can impart just a little bit more wisdom and structure and system into the process and just a little bit more. And the beauty of a family business is if you're willing to perpetuate it kind of forever, the time arc on all of these learnings is very long. And so if we can just get a few percent better every generation, sooner or later it will start to work, just exponentially smoother.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it seems like you're just, when I talk with you, the culture and the values that it seems like have been instilled in your family system seem very strong. Just the way that you talk about your family, the way you talk about being stewards, like it seems like that culture is very strong. Was there anything in particular, like a standout moment or something where you're like, that really shaped like the way that you, like, obviously, how these values show up in your life now?
Yeah, I think it's one of those. So while we're fourth generation, I'm fourth generation with my cousins in the business. And so, yes, we've been around. We're coming, next year's our 100-year anniversary and all these fun and exciting things. The first 2 generations, like my great grandpa and most of my grandpa's career, it was a one-man working out of the garage operation. And so even though we did this kind of G3 to G4 transition, in a lot of ways, my dad and my uncle were like the founders in terms of, they took it from one place in Tacoma, convinced my grandpa to get an actual office and started to build it from there to, covering the Western United States by the time they're stepping out of the day to day. And so, it's, seeing, growing up in that part of that, up the scaling, that rapid scaling,
Mm-hmm.
there really was no difference in, like, the family values were the work values and the work values were the family values. Cause like there was no walls between any of it. Like you got picked
Mm-hmm.
up at school and taken to the office to do your homework. And like really we used to, I mean, for my entire childhood, we had people from the business staying at our house because that was what we could do at the time when people traveled in. So like it was really kind of one of those, like there was no, the lines between business and family there weren't any. And
Yeah.
so really it was just one of those where the values of the family are the values of the business and vice versa, because they have shaped us all together in kind of that, like it's all grown as one thing. And I don't know how we could actually untangle and
Mm-hmm.
really point to specifics, because it's like all of us learning things together, uh, whether it was, my dad as the CEO or me as a 10-year-old hearing things as I'm doing my homework in the office. Like, you pick up on that stuff and it all just kind of blends together. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we're trying to make sure we keep, is that as we do these things with exposing the next generation to parts of the business, and if they ask a question, we go deep with them, even if we don't think they'll understand it. Like we try to honor that curiosity, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the more we can continue to keep those two things the same, as long as the family values and the company values mirror each other and grow together,
Mm-hmm.
that creates a lot of synchronicity in what we want to do. And it feels easy as you think about owning it and being proud of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And as you think about the next generation, I think you just gave me a snippet of the type of thing that you're hoping to instill in them, and as you think it forward. But what else are you thinking about as you think of preparing the next generation?
The biggest part of next gen thinking or planning is really continuing to foster curiosity in whatever they're passionate about, and
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging we come from this place of extreme privilege within having a family business and kind of having these opportunities already set for them. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
what can you do with that? What are you going to chase and learn and be good at in your life that will
Mm-hmm.
make this world better? And some of us are choosing to do that through our family business. Others are choosing to do that through their own passions.
Yeah.
And how do we continue to instill that in the next generation to say, what we care about is being curious and learning and diving deep and looking at how the world could be better, whether that's through the philanthropy side or the business side or being entrepreneurial or just finding your passion and being really good at that.
Yeah.
How can we as a family support each of these kiddos in their experience of life so that
Mm,
they can be as free as possible to find that passion and chase it with 100% of everything they've got?
yeah. No, I love that. And it sounds like your family gave you the space to go explore things that you were interested and curious about, and it brought you back in a really beautiful way to the family system. I That's not everyone's story, and I think for next gens listening, it sounds like your family is doing a really cool job of who's in, who's out, what are your skills, what do you bring to this to make sure that you feel like whole people. Because that's a really important thing in feeling fulfilled in life, and that you're living your purpose, is that you can show up authentically as yourself. Are there any other words of wisdom or advice that you'd give to a next gen who's maybe you 5 to 7 years ago, right? That precipice of I'm not quite into that, like, more of a leadership role yet, and they're just trying to navigate what that next step looks like, and starting conversations.
I think one of those critical parts, and I don't know exactly when it happened, um, we were never pressured to join the business. And I don't think I would have if I'd have felt pressure to.
Mm,
We're also not pressured to stay. And I think that is this critical piece in anyone's career where, separate from the ownership and the legacy and all of these things, I had to make a decision. Like, is this what I'm passionate about? And if so, the rest of it will take care of itself.
mm,
And, if you find yourself, I'm here because it's my family's thing, but like it's not my passion. And I'm going to look back at the end of my career and regret not having taken a shot at this or taken a shot at that or exploring this other thing. That's a really important space to explore. And I would encourage people to look at that because I have seen it over and over where people stay because they feel they have to. And there's resentment, and that leads to entitlement, or like, you owe me because I stayed and I didn't want to. Well, I didn't actually care if you stayed. You could have gone and done that other thing. And it can get toxic quickly. And so it was this space of being like, it's not going fast enough. And in fact, it was going wildly fast and better than I knew, like how it was going elsewhere. Right. But in my experience, I was like saying, I don't have answers. I don't have certainty. And then realizing like, actually, I love this job and I love this company. And I don't want to work elsewhere. Like, this is where I want to be. And all of that other stuff it's not gone, but it's like a weight falls away. And you're like, we're going to get there. We're doing the right things. We're having the right conversations. Sure, it's not done as early as I want it to, but my time horizon is significantly longer than the generation before me. And so I need to have some trust and faith in the family that I love, that they will get that we all will get where we need to be. But in the meantime, I get to do a job I'm excited to go to every day. And so I think it's that kind of commitment at a certain point of just saying, this is where I choose to be. It's not where I have to be. And once you can decide that, the rest of it kind of solves for itself, because it's noise now. It's something to be solved, but it's a task. It's just a checkbox that needs to get sorted out. And at the end of the day, we can work through those problems. When we're in business, we understand how to work a problem. But sometimes we make them out to be these huge mountains that'll never be solved because we have some set expectation that's not being met, that maybe we've not even communicated. And even if we have, it's not really ours to set because it's the previous generations to really work on. And so we always joke happiness is dictated by expectation. And sometimes, or not sometimes, almost every time in our experience and in those I talk to, our expectations are somewhat unrealistic. And it's not because we feel entitled for it, but because we are passionate and want to make sure that we have clarity and certainty into our futures and career. And so I think the more we can explain why we have impatience to the older generation, and the older generation can explain why it's taking them the time it is and what the challenges they're thinking through, that's where it really starts to be like, oh, okay. Like, it's not that they're not working on it or thinking about it, but I'm already thinking about my kids in the next generation. And I'm like, oh God, how are we going to do this? And so, until you're in that seat, it doesn't feel like a big deal. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a mountain. And so it's that whole dichotomy of generations and saying what we feel, but holding space and grace for each other. It's so hard, but there's no way really past it except for through.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of wisdom in there. The choosing to be there and not feeling like you have to be forced. And I think the communication is such an important piece, making sure that everyone feels heard, because you get to choose to be there, but so does that generation that's leaving. And so does that generation that's coming up. And there's a lot of factors and there's a lot of history for each person as a human and who they are and who they choose as a partner if they go down the route of having a life partner, and if they choose to have a family, and all of those things, right, start to stack up, and it just becomes this web of things that you get to think about as a family unit and start to have discussion. So if it feels overwhelming, that's okay. It sounds like your family does a good job doing a lot of this, but also you said you've brought in people to help facilitate conversations and talk about these things. So that's like, give yourself permission too, that like you do not have to be the person to figure out how to have all these conversations on your own. There's many different resources and groups that can help you start a conversation. So I don't know, before we go to our final 3 questions, AJ, if you have any like favorite resources or places where you've gotten inspiration to help support you on your growth journey.
So first off, I would say I don't think any family business should go at this alone. I would say the success rate goes up wildly if you're willing to bring in someone that you as a family can trust and can kind of call BS on each other. Because we've worked with people that they'll interview each of us individually, and then we'll get together to talk as a family, and they'll be sitting there like, that's not what you're saying in private, and be able to kind of point out some of this stuff and challenge us, because there is just so many layers in a family around those relationships. And I think one of them we hired and let go multiple times based on how they made the family feel uncomfortable. But like, really, that was like, they're like, don't worry, this happens a lot. And the reality is it's like, we needed them so badly. And at certain points, we weren't ready for the truth we had to face. And that's just the reality. Is like, sometimes we think we're ready and we're not. And we have to go back and think about it and start again. And it's going to be a lot of stops and starts. But I think outside professional help is critical in making these successful. It can be done. It's just a lot harder if you try and go it alone, not knowing the questions to ask or how it should, how it could go. And so, I mean, we've leveraged the Pacific Family Business Institute, which is a Puget Sound-based organization that does a ton of, panels and speaking and opportunities to get together with other family businesses. Within our industry, we've just created our own informal thing where we get together with other family businesses and talk about how within our industry we can help to perpetuate family businesses. There are a million, I don't know, actually a lot, but Andrew, you would know better. And, in terms of the companies that do this, we were lucky enough through the Family Business Institute to be connected with someone specifically that helped us. And I also know a lot of the colleges. So like, we did some work through Seattle University. I know there's a group through Denver University, but a lot of colleges and schools of business have really taken on family business, understanding how big of a part of the economic ecosystem it is, to try and help perpetuate those through programs, not like going to school for it, but they've put on programmatically a bunch of stuff for family businesses. So that's a great place to look in your local area, wherever someone is through larger universities.
Yeah. The peer component of being able to talk to people in other businesses is so important and can really level up too. So I don't know if you know this, AJ, but when we bring businesses in and we help facilitate some of their conversations, there's also a peer learning component to it where they can come in and talk to other businesses that we're working with, and basically to the point that you just made of we all go better, we go further together, which is awesome. So
that's a really important part. Yeah.
It is, yes. I know we're coming up on our time, and I want to make sure we get through our rapid fire questions. What have you chosen not to inherit?
Oh, and so this question, I read it and I started laughing. And what I mean when I think about this question, again, growing up in the business with my uncle and my dad, but really all of our vacations were conferences together, or one of them's going off to do a meeting and the other one's hanging out with all of us, and back and forth. And I think we've inherited so much of both of their characteristics. I look at all of us in our generation, and we're all a mix of both families. Like, there isn't a lot of delineation, which I love. But I think what we've chosen not to inherit is we want to feed the next generation, feed their curiosity around the business. But we also want to create some space from the operating entity and just be a little more, again, I think going from, even though they're Gen 3, kind of that founder mentality to this like of rapid scaling and bootstrapped and all of these, to kind of growing into ourselves and maturing and professionalizing and trying to really share the load. It's easier to spread it across 4 of us than it was for them as 2, and really try and be more present and available for our families, and not just like our nuclear, but also like we all live within a mile of each other. And so be present for all the different generation 5s, and be focused on being present and being available and being around for all of them, which, wasn't a reality that was possible for generation 3. I mean, heck, there weren't even all these regional airlines didn't exist. They had to get in the car and drive to our offices all over. So they're just like, yep, 4-day road trips every week off to wherever they needed to be. And so just trying to like protect our time with the families, I think is something that we've really made a huge effort and talk about in terms of trying to be here and be present more for our family.
I love that. I live 1.5 miles from my sister and my daughter and my niece. Yeah, hang out all the time. So it's so important for fostering the closeness of the next generation.
Yeah.
What's a part of your story that you're learning to honor right now?
I think it's again, all these lines are so blurred with what's the business learning and what I'm learning. But as we've really scaled as an organization and kind of, I would think, hit our stride as we're growing and growing quite quickly, it's this realization that what got us here won't get us there. And, just pointing into the, 5 years into the future and looking at, what's our just normal growth rate, and like, what does that look like? And realizing, we talk about everyone in the organization, but especially the ownership, has to get better personally by at least the percentage of growth rate every single year. So if the company, for easy numbers, is going to grow at 10% and I get 10% better as a leader, I have just held my spot. Like I'm just holding water in terms of where I need to be. And so it's this idea of really focusing on A, working on the business, and B, working on my development. Because if I can't up-level myself as a leader, as a person, then I cannot steward the business in the future. And so as the business grows faster and faster, each of us individually has to focus on development at a much greater rate just to keep up with it.
I love that. That's really cool. I love if the business is growing, I need to make sure that I'm growing at the same rate. I love that.
And ideally faster than, right? Like I want to be at least, if we're going to grow at 10, I want to grow at 11. Like I want to be a little bit better.
I love that. And in one word, what are you the first of in your family?
Well, there's a couple that I cheekily would think of. I'm the first of my family. So I work with my 3 cousins who are all siblings from the other side, and my siblings chose other paths in their life. So I'm the first of my side's G4. I'm also the first associate certified entomologist. So I do love this work and the bug side of things and the technical. I find it fascinating, and I do have a real passion for the ground level work that we do. And what that means for the world's food supply and how we impact globally from these 10 Western states. The things that we take care of and protect are shipped across the entire world, ensuring food safety.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love, most people are like, my family business does pest solutions. Like, I don't want anything to do with, like, it's kind of like a weird industry, but then a lot of people come in and so it sounds like you've really just wrapped your arms around what your family's doing and have a good passion around that, which I love, because that's what we talked about, needing to have passion for the things we do. So.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, AJ, I'm so glad you joined the podcast today. And the wisdom that you shared with everyone, particularly around your family and your governance and just feeling passion and being a good steward to the next generation. So there's a lot for the listeners to learn in here, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Awesome. That's it for today. I hope today's episode offered some clarity or at least a little company. If this resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with another next gen. While my podcast is for the successors, you can also check out its sister show, The Business Transition Roadmap, hosted by my business partner, Elizabeth Ledoux. There's lots of great material in business and family succession over there. I hope you'll take a listen. Be well, and see you next time.